Hey there, it's Jody Sutter of the Sutter Company, and welcome back to this episode of Just Ask Jody Live, my LinkedIn Live new business series. So today I'm just going to get right into our guest today, Bob Hutchins. Let me give you a quick intro. And by the way, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for all the folks who RSVP to attend. I also want to acknowledge this is a really busy time of year. I don't know if this is like other people who are online today, but I always expect that this is going to be the time of year where I get to pause and catch up on things, not only professionally and personally. And you know what? It never happens. I always end up feeling a little bit stretched thin. And so perhaps you are too. So I really want to appreciate folks who are here today. Of course, that touches on some of sort of mental health, mental well-being, and how we interact with our work life and our personal life, which of course has become our digital life. So I am trying to sort of ease into an elegant transition to the introduction of my guest, Bob Hutchins. So I'm going to refer down to my notes as I read his intro. Bob he lives in Franklin, Tennessee. That's just outside of Nashville. And he is a former agency owner and now the principal and founder of Human Voice Media and Consulting. He's got a master's degree in behavioral and organizational psychology, which we'll hear a little bit more about. This is a relatively new development in his career after many years as working in an agency and being an agency owner. And that's recently fueled his fascination with studying the intersection of digital media, culture, and psychology with a restorative worldview. I think we could all use that right now. Bob is the author of several books, but the one that's out right now is Our Digital Soul, Collective Anxiety, Media Trauma, and a Path Towards Discovery. He is the host of the podcast, The Human Voice with Bob Hutchins, as well as the podcast or co-host of the podcast, Agency Exposed, which is a really great resource for agency owners. And that's where I first met Bob as a guest on this podcast. So I look forward to welcoming Bob. He's going to pop up any moment now, I think, right?
Hello,
There he is.
Jody.
Hello. It's so nice to see you. And thank you so much for joining us today.
It's great to be here.
Just Us Doing Live. Yeah. So I think your path is very interesting. We were talking a little bit before we started live about the role of psychology in marketing and advertising and just interactions with other human beings. So I'm just going to go off a little bit of go off script a little bit in terms of the questions I was going to ask, and just maybe have you talk to me about why you made the turn into becoming a student of behavioral psychology relatively late in your career, and what it meant to you and how that is helping you as a professional.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. And a lot of people have been asking me that. And sometimes I ask myself that, what am I doing? But actually the path is not as obscure as you would think. One of the things that I've realized as an agency owner and as somebody who has been involved in helping people market and advertise, as many people who may be watching this do, I had a sudden realization early on that we are acting in the role as behavioral psychologists almost every day with our clients. What I mean by that is when we are working with clients and putting together strategies, sales optimizations, whatever it may be, e-commerce, advertising, what we're trying to get them to do, because the clients have come and said, I can't get my consumer, my customer, my client, my whatever it may be, my donor, if you work in nonprofits, to behave the way that I want them to behave. In other words, they're not engaging, they're not purchasing, they're not asking the right questions. And so they hire us as professionals to come in and analyze that and get their customers to behave in the right way. So that whole process, we have to look at human behavior. We have to look at how people respond. We have to look at demographics and psychographics, and we begin to segment and say, well, if your customer is this person in this age bracket that lives here, then they're going to act and talk and communicate in certain ways. And here's how we need to rearrange your communication strategy or your sales strategy. So I realized that early on. So that was one reason. One of the second reasons that was a little bit more probably profound and unique to my situation was I ran an agency for over 15 years. Most of that time, it was very successful. And as you know, Jody, agency life is not for the faint of heart. Uh,
Oh,
it is about, there's a lot of adrenaline, there's a lot of creativity, and it's why we
mhm.
love it.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of change and diversity, but there's also a lot of pressure. And so after 15 years, for various reasons, I burned out and I hit a
Mhm.
wall, had some pretty significant mental health issues myself.
Wow.
So unwinding that over the past 5, 6 years, trying to understand myself, that was another reason. Oh, I need to really understand that. And then the last
Mm.
third reason was that mixed with my career history, I began to see the effects, good, bad, and indifferent, of the technology and the screen life that I loved and still love.
Yeah.
But I also could not be silent or say, well, these are just tools and people need to be self-regulating. I began to say stuff in my family and my kids and people that I knew myself of how this technology, we had changed and it was changing us. So I know that's a lot, but
Yeah.
those all kind of combined in a perfect storm to
Yeah.
say I need to understand and have the credentials to talk about this as I go to the next part of my career.
Yeah. Oh, it's so exciting. But also, um, as you just described, probably a bit scary and a little bit, I'm sure you felt a bit off balance for a while. Maybe that's to put it mildly. Um, but now you're here to also tell others what you went through and hopefully have us learn from that. One of the things in the title of your book is media trauma. And the other thing I wanted to ask you is if you could explain exactly what you mean by media trauma. I know I'm interested. I'm sure a lot of other people would be interested to know exactly what that is and whether or not we're suffering from it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be happy to. My co-author is Jenny Black. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist. And when we came together about 2.5 years ago, over some mutual friends, and she began talking and using this term, I believe she was probably one of the first ones to use it.
Yeah.
But in a nutshell, it is, we define it as the experience through our media and personal devices that hinder or harm our capacity to be mentally whole.
Hmm.
So when we think of trauma, many of us think about major traumas. It's a
Yeah.
popular word right now. I realize that. But if you were to ask the person on the street, you think of things like violence or
Yeah.
war or accidents or
Or
sexual,
pandemic,
yeah,
losing loved
pandemic,
ones
we
or
can
getting
talk
sick
about
yourself.
that too. But all of the things that these awful things that happen to so many of us in our lives,
Mhm.
and we're all going to suffer some stressful event. But they also can come from living in a hyper mediated environment where we're all constantly
Mm.
in the presence of imagery and information that we can't escape or control. So that's where we came up with media trauma, and that's what we mean
Yeah.
by it.
When you say you can't escape, I think I'm pretty good when it comes to my personal screen hygiene. But I think the other day I found myself doing something that I don't often do, which was sitting at the edge of my bed, turning my phone off because I'm a big do not disturb or airplane mode person at night. But like scrolling through stuff. And I stopped myself after 5 minutes going, what am I doing? Like, what has drawn me? It was really like a compulsion. Must look, must look. So yeah, how is that like, how does that affect our, I guess our personal and work life? I know that's probably a bigger question than you can even answer in the time we've got.
Yeah, well, it affects us obviously. The obvious thing is time, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I ask this question a lot of times. I'll do it with students that I'm speaking with, but anyone here listening, here's the question. Almost everybody listening to this has some sort of social media feed.
Hmm.
So let's just take Instagram, for
Mm.
example, or you could substitute Facebook. Tell me the details of 3 posts that you've seen or engaged in over the past 4 or 5 days.
Right. Yeah.
And most people can't even give you 1, right?
Hmm.
So the question is, what is it that you got out of that 4 hours a day online that you spent on social media? Some people more, some people less. What
Yeah.
is it that you received? The answer is, for most of us, nothing.
Hmm.
What you did is you wasted that time, and that the most precious thing that we have on the earth that we all hold dear, our time, was literally stolen from us. And we can have a debate on our personal responsibility versus algorithms that use us as the product to sell ads, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is. Um, and a combination of both, obviously. But many of us find that we don't think there is a way to live outside of that. So kudos for
Mhm.
you, Jody, to have enough self-awareness to practice and to try to be aware.
Yeah.
But I speak to so many people. I was on a podcast yesterday, Jody, and with my co-author, and she throws out the idea of taking a 30-day fast from the online world.
Yeah. I've heard of those. Yep.
And you would think the two interviewers on their side eyes got really big and they said, wait a second, how do you do that? Is that possible?
Yeah.
It's almost like it was such a foreign concept
Right.
to say, you can get phones that just text and phone call.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and it's okay to check your email 2 or 3 times a day. But beyond that, do you have the capacity to go cold turkey? And it's really interesting. We've gotten to the point in a few short years only where we feel like this is the world and there is nothing else and I can't escape
Right.
it. And that, in my opinion, is the source of so much media trauma, anxiety,
Yeah.
stress, etc. Because when we're constantly in the presence of all kinds of information, dopamine hits, serotonin hits to us that we've never experienced in the existence
Yeah.
of human beings before.
Right.
Imagine living in a world, and let's talk about the real world, Jody, where you went outside your house or your apartment, and every day when you walked on the sidewalk, there would be hundreds and thousands of people saying, Jody, good job.
Huge, huge,
Jody, you look
huge.
amazing. Jody,
Right.
awesome. Jody, or maybe
Yeah.
there's negative things like, Jody, I hate you. Jody, I don't like the way you look today. Whatever
Yeah.
it may be. That would be a really unhealthy environment. Imagine doing that to a child as a parent.
Yeah.
Billy, you look great today. Billy, awesome. Billy. And our brains are not set up to
Yeah.
handle that type of human engagement.
Yeah.
But we enter into those worlds and those spaces, and for many of us, it is something that we do for hours and hours and hours a day,
Right.
and we're naive to think it doesn't affect our business lives, our personal lives, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think our parasympathetic system isn't built for that type of that barrage of communication. I want to go back to something you had also said about time, maybe tie it into what you just finished talking about. So, and tie it back to sort of agency life and the agency part of agency life that I probably most affect, which is helping agency owners grow their agency, business development. One of the things I also probably the biggest obstacle I have in working with my clients to get them to see progress is the I'm going to call it an excuse. I'm just going to call it that. People hope that's okay. Is the excuse of time. I have no time. I'm so busy. I've got so many other things to do. Yeah, I try time blocking. It doesn't work. But I say, well, um, if a really big RFP came through the door, or the most important search consultant in the country calls you tomorrow with a huge pitch, you'd find the time, right? Even if it meant working probably way too late than you should and giving up some weekends. So I think time is a very elastic concept. And yet we also make some, maybe not I don't want to say poor. I don't want to say poor because um, there can be enjoyment out of social media. And so I think that it can be a form of relaxation, but we sometimes make choices that maybe we didn't have to make if we were going to save some time for quality business development. And I guess I also wanted to ask, what some of the things that you are discovering and some of the ideas that you're developing, how does that affect how an agency owner should construct his or her day, especially when they need to make sure the lights stay on and billings come in and they're getting new clients and they're keeping existing clients happy?
Yeah. Well, we've done a lot of research on this, and Cal Newport, I would recommend anybody get his work and deep work specifically, because you're absolutely right. We do what we want to do and we prioritize what we want to prioritize.
Yeah, we make a lot of choices in the day.
We do. And there is something in psychology called the switch cost of effect. And I encourage everyone to go read things about the study of the switch cost effect. And what it says is there's been several studies that prove that multitasking is
Right.
not only non-effective, but it's actually detrimental to managing your time. And so let me give you an example. In our book, I reference a friend of mine who I was talking to not long ago. He was somebody that's a colleague of mine in his 50s. And he was saying, Bob, do you ever have a problem reading? And I said, what do you mean? He said, I love to read, but I find that lately when I open a book and I try to get through a chapter, it's almost like I can't. I said, well, tell me more. And he said, well, apart from being distracted with notifications, I always feel like I have to check this, I have to do that. And I think, again, getting back to our earlier conversation, I think we're being trained to multitask, to check, to be impulsive, okay, I'm going to respond to this notification that just hit me. And like you said at the beginning of this conversation, Jody, there are tools like Do Not Disturb.
Yeah.
You will find that you have all of a sudden magically more time in the day when you say, I'm going to block out the next 2 hours. I'm going to turn off my internet connection, or I'm going to put myself in Do Not Disturb.
Yeah.
And I'm going to really get into some deep work and focus.
Yeah.
And I think people are waking up to this. But we have been, and also the cognitive load of working from home and hybrid work is very difficult.
That's interesting. Say a little bit about that, if you could.
Yeah. So when we all went into our workplaces more, I mean, many of us work hybrid, have been for years, but majority of people had spaces to go into. And so for the last 100 years, we've been trained we walk through our doors at work in the office, and there's like this magical, wall that goes up and says, I am now in work mode. And my home life stays at home, and never the two shall meet, right?
Yeah.
Now, what that does now when you're sitting at home working, many, many advantages, not having to commute, we can go through.
Right.
Studies have shown a hybrid environment is actually more productive and could be better for mental health. However, there are downsides. And the downside is there was an advantage of focusing only at work. But when I'm home, there's that cognitive load of going, oh, is the dog out of the picture on the Zoom call? Oh, lunchtime, do I have time to go run that errand I need to do? I got to pick up the kids at 3:00. On and on it goes. So there's on top of all your work, you've also had these other layers of, i.e., your home life and work life, that we're still trying to figure out. How do you sort those in a 8-hour period that we call work time?
Yeah.
That's the cognitive load that I think a lot of us are struggling with. So the answer is, on Sunday evening or whenever you can, begin to plan, schedule, and remove as many decisions that you're going to have to make and take them off your plate.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really great idea. So sometimes I find that my Sunday evening is sacred, and there's nothing that's going to get me out of that downtime feeling than going into my Asana tasks and organizing. But often I will try to do that on a Friday afternoon or even Monday morning. Monday morning isn't sometimes not ideal, because then by the time I'm actually finished doing that effectively, it's Monday afternoon, and a big part of the week is gone. But I think that really makes a lot of sense, like taking the time to look at things from a big picture. I also find for, for myself as a business owner, as well as a new business coach, when you want to create something different and something bigger outside of the normal protocol, the existence reality today, you do have to carve that time off. You have to give yourself that time to focus, to think in a different way than you do when you are answering emails or responding to client requests. And so I've discovered that that's really important. And whether I figure that on Friday evening or Sunday evening or Monday morning, it certainly helped me make time for the big stuff that I have to think about. And it's a big part of what I do with my clients as well. Um, if they want to see that transformation in how their agency is developing, they've got to make that time. And I guess it also brings me to another question about, given that as consumers of media, we're a little bit inundated, how do we as creators and users of those platforms to promote ourselves and our clients, are there any adjustments that we should make so that we start to use these media more just more effectively, but also responsibly?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a bigger conversation because everybody's
Mm,
a little bit unique and different. But I would say, for instance, Zoom. Let's take that for example.
yeah.
We're all spending a lot of time on Zoom and video calls. The great thing is it allows us to connect, but I'm talking into a lot of companies and individuals, small businesses, large businesses. We have Zoom fatigue.
Yes. Yeah.
Microsoft did a study this year actually on the effects of people who line up meetings back to back and those who take breaks in between,
Hmm.
and they used resonance imaging of the brains, and you can study it, look at it online. It's really fascinating that the stress on the brain between people who take breaks in between meetings and those who don't, at least 15-20 minutes, your brain needs a reset. I would also say this one's kind of funny, but it's a simple one. Cover your face when you're on Zoom. Our
Hmm.
brains are not meant to be looking at someone and trying to focus while simultaneously looking at ourselves. And that again,
Oh, that's
that
interesting.
that dissonance
Hmm.
of, oh, I got to stay attention. Am I blinking too much? How's my hair? But trying to give the other person attention, you're switching cognitively
Yeah.
between two different kind of things. And we get off a 45-minute Zoom call and we go,
Well,
oh, why am I
exhausted.
exhausted?
Yeah.
Just that little simple one of just remove your picture or cover it with something
That's so
on it
interesting.
with on another your
So,
notes or whatever. That's a big one because you can really focus in on the person without splitting your attention of trying to look at yourself of are you how you look, how you don't look,
okay.
and that can be really a game changer for a lot of people. So
So I'm
take
going to
breaks on
challenge that a
technology.
little bit,
Okay.
not from the validity of the psychology, because I think you're absolutely right, and I know I feel it after a day of Zoom calls. I am exhausted, but again, from my perspective of like, and I could be, maybe I've been giving my clients bad advice, but I also feel like when you're in Zoom, it's so easy to it's easy to not look in the right place, to look as though you are distracted, because so anyway, in other words, I find the best way to make sure that I'm appearing as though I am um, looking at my audience is either to look right in the camera, which is what I do, which is actually what I'm doing right now. And a little while I have been like moving my eyes around to see you and my screen, but a lot of times I also look at myself, because it's almost like I play this little mind game of pretending that I am my audience. So I'm both myself and my audience. And so I'm seeing what my audience is seeing. And the only way I can really know what my audience is seeing is by looking at myself. But it sounds like maybe that's not the healthiest thing to do. So, gosh, I have to figure out how we square that one for good
Yeah.
presentations over
I
Zoom.
think in principle, what you're saying is really true
Hmm.
because if I'm in an interview or I'm talking to someone, it's really, really helpful. And this is a principle that a lot of people teach to be that like third man effect. If
Yeah.
I'm sitting in a room in real life and there's a person across the desk from me, across the chair, or there's two people. One way to have a sense of awareness and focus is to imagine yourself looking down on all three of you from above. What would that
Mm.
look like? Another one would be imagine looking at yourself from below, like a camera angle. In a real world experience, those mental pictures help
Mhm.
you to stay focused, collect more information, etc. It's like a psychological trick. However, I would argue, and I think the science argues, when we have screens and we're actually literally doing that with our eyeballs, we're trying to take in and process too
Yeah.
many things at one time. That does put a lot of cognitive load on us.
Yeah.
So to your point, for me and for others, you can still focus in on that person and the camera.
Yeah.
You're just not having yourself that self-awareness consciousness that we've never had. That was never a thing. Think about it
No,
for
I
the
know.
last 100,000 years as human beings, that we've never had to really process that. Now,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, we're all thrust into seeing the world this way.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. It's not always the best, but I think when we're getting better, the next 5 or 10 years, I think we'll have multiple camera angles, we'll have
Yeah.
holograms, all the things that
Mm.
could solve some of these issues for sure.
The other thing too that and I'm starting to use these tools in my business as well is we're starting to there are more tools to allow different types of engagement. And we don't have an example of this today, but in a Zoom call with things like Ecamm or GoodNotes, where you can take the attention off your face for a moment and bring it to
Excellent.
a whiteboard or a diagram that you're adding to. And I think that also helps the attendees, the participants as well, because then they can stop looking at your face too.
Yeah, I would say another trick when it comes to Zoom and other technology is try to try to be back as much as you can
Hmm,
without harming the angle. Maybe if you have some tools to zoom in,
interesting.
imagine in real life you're trying to have a meeting and you are literally what 18 inches here that we have from someone. Again, it's your brain trying to figure out, okay, what's going
Yeah,
on? You're interacting and having a real conversation, but you're right up
yeah,
in someone's face staring at them.
yeah,
That's another thing, is try to be back as much as you can. These are all
interesting.
practical things, but
Yeah,
if you think through them from a psychological standpoint, logically, they can
yeah.
really help to make a difference.
Yeah, I think also as we go forward and as we all start to learn how to exist in this type of environment, both our clients as well as agencies, we will, I think that clients will also become a little bit more understanding. We'll start to have more of an even playing field where we both understand what we need in order to thrive in this environment. We only have a few minutes left, and I would love to finish off, though, if it's okay, just talking to you. I know when we were preparing for this, one of the things you had mentioned to me was your thoughts on the agency model of the future. And I would love to hear a little bit about what you see as your agency model of the future, and then also a little bit about your new endeavor, because I know those two are related.
Yeah, I would just say I'm wrapping up a contract with 5 by 5 agency here in Nashville. An amazing organization, full service agency. And so as that wraps up, as I look toward 2023, I've been really thinking through what my future is. And one thing that I've been thinking about, honestly, for about 10 years now, and I've actually talked to several agency owners, what is the thing that we create for clients as
Mm,
agencies? What is the thing that is the deliverable in this new era that we live in? And most of it is
yeah.
media. It's some form of media, whether it be print or online. Most of it's digital in some format. On and on it goes. And I believe the agency of the future, as technology evolves and changes, I think you'll see agencies shrinking,
Hmm.
because the things that so many team members do in agencies are going to become automated. It's going to be, AI can optimize things. AI can write
Mm.
things to a certain level. They can manage reporting, several things that machines can do. So I think if if the investment in the technology in there, it's more of a shrinking versus an expanding
Right.
human force, human capital. So, all of that said, I also believe that agencies, as service agents,
Mhm.
their value is really in their client base, not in any type of intellectual property. That's a problem.
Interesting. And because of the knowledge that they've gained from the clients that they've worked with? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, for instance, their client base, their client knowledge, and I would
Mm.
argue that value is really hard to quantify. So for
Mhm.
people
Yeah,
who are
very hard.
going, I want to start an agency and I want to build it and sell it one day, my advice and what I'm doing, start a media company. You produce media, be something that you can own the IP around, where you can actually create these things that you create for clients and then sometimes have some ownership
Mhm.
of it, and then say, I'm going to create this thing that I can then systematize and offer to other clients,
Yeah.
but it's I own it, and there's a value there, so that 5-10 years down the road, you have all this intellectual property. Maybe it's a podcast network, whether it's videos, courses, software
Mm.
as a service, technology, subscriptions. To me, that's the agency of the future. So it's more
Yeah.
of a media entity and a production house that you do on behalf of clients versus just over and over services that then when they're done, you have to recreate it again.
Yeah, I know that there's a big, there's what's most businesses that want to grow they get to a point where they realize that they must systematize the things that they or the agency owners, agency founders realize they have to find a way to systematize what it is that they do for their clients on through that interpersonal level. And some are successful at doing that, some not so much. It's really hard. It's something that I help my clients with because sometimes it's very difficult to understand what that specialness is when you're looking at it from the inside, but it is more challenging when it's a thinking process, a way of the way how do I come up with these good ideas rather than how do I take these good ideas and turn them into assets that will help sell or promote a product or service.
Yeah, and the other thing too is thinking like a media company, you're
Mm.
always creating content.
Mhm.
This is
And
what
that
I've done my
content
whole career, and
grows in
that's the
value.
best marketing strategy. It's a
Mhm.
longer game, but it's about search engine, it's about ranking, it's about
Mm.
people building trust, because when people want to engage with you, they want to see what you've done. They want to
Yeah.
research you. They want to Google you. They want to look on social media. And if you
Yeah.
haven't spent the time creating media,
Yeah.
um, your competitors are going to beat you out. I mean, you look at people like Neil Patel and these others that have built huge agency presence. What they've done is they've taken the time to create content. So why not see yourself as a production house and as a media
Mhm.
company that creates these and actually can consult and engage with clients?
Yeah, I think there are going to be some agencies that are better suited to that than others, but I think it's a really interesting, an interesting model. And so you've just your new endeavor, Human Voice Media. That's basically that's the model that you're going to follow, right? You're going to test it out.
Yeah, what I've realized for so many years, Jody, is I'm a content creator. That's what I've
Mm.
always done. If
Well,
you were
that's
to
interesting because that even means that you are then following what it is that you're meant to do. So I think that's also a beautiful thing as well.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't even realize it. You wake up
Yeah,
and go, "Oh, wait a second,
yeah,
I've been doing it." And so even when I was running my agency, you can go back and see content from the early 2000s
hmm,
around digital media and SMS text messaging. If you Google my name and my
yeah,
agency, you can still find that content out there that
yeah,
exists, and it'll exist virtually forever. And so as I looked at that, I said, "Oh, because I love to write books, I love to do podcasts, I love to speak.
yeah,
All of that is digital content and media." So I said, "Well, I'm just going to keep doing that. And if clients want to come in and consult, and I can do things for them, and but in the meantime, I'll keep creating content and figure out how to monetize it,
yeah.
whether it be through, like I said, digital courses or speaking or software development, etc."
Cool. Bob, thank you so much for joining me today. I think I probably touched on only a portion of the questions that I had, but This was really interesting. I think that I recommend that everyone go and get the book, Our Digital Soul, and we
What it
are
looks like.
and we have some information about learning more about the book and learning more about you. And I think my teammate Megan, if she could put that up on the screen there, so there's some contact info for Bob, and we'll also leave that in the show notes as well. And this will be recorded for those who want to look at this in the future. Bob, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you,
And
Jody, for having me. I love what you're doing. I'm glad that
thank
we
you.
were able to connect a few years ago, and here we are
Yeah,
again.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that's
Cool.
awesome.